during that he realised there's a very rich world here to explore, and it's something that's relatively unexplored, or underexplored. Compared to the rest of the mythology, and so there's an interest in it from that level. It's kind of, to me, it's sort of fascinating to think of. I know who Superman is and what values he represents and what he means to so many people and what that symbol means. And so you sort of wonder what makes Superman Superman, and how much of that was his upbringing on Earth with Mara Park Kent, and how much of it, what makes him super, or is it his Kryptonian blood, and or is it a mixture of that, and if some of it has to do with his Kryptonian lineage and his heritage, then maybe it's worth sort of exploring what that world, what kind of world births a hero like Superman, So I think that there's interest in it at that level. I think being a science fiction, which means that we get to, I think the best science fiction holds up a bit of a mirror to society and makes some social commentary and can do it in a way that is not, it's not too overt, or you can do it in a way like through the lens of science fiction. It can maybe be a little less confrontational, and we can start to talk about some issues that maybe otherwise we wouldn't feel as comfortable to. So I think that's what. I think that hopefully that answers it. There's lots of reasons why to do it, I guess, but I think they're the focus.
So Krypton just premiered. What audience or demographic were you guys most nervous about how they would receive it and how engaged they would be?
I think we were hoping. I mean, the hope was that it would have a broad appeal.
Of course,
that it would. That it wouldn't be a show just for comic book fans, and so if you're not super familiar with the Superman mythology, you could still get on board here. You don't need to have read every issue or watched anything that's come before. You can really walk into this show, and it should work for you. So but we also know that the comic book fan, that audience is really important for the success of the show. And we were just talking in the panel earlier about the sense that this is for us it's a privilege to work on anything connected to that Superman mythology. That's as a kid I can't remember life before Superman, and so many great creators and people that have worked on it in TV and film and whatever else, and so for us to have a chance to do that, that's I think what the anxiety is about, wanting to honour that and make sure that the comic book fans don't feel like we've taken this jewel in the crown really of the comic book world with Superman. I think we just want to make sure we're not disrespecting that legacy.
It too much.
So we don't want to, so we have to be careful of not disrespecting that legacy, but also still being bold enough to forge our own ground, and tell a new story. Otherwise, why do it?
Why bring it to life in the first place?
So exactly.
Thank you.
So even though in a sense it's a prequel, it does seem like it's more than that, since the future of Superman is at stake based on what we've seen in the premiere. So since it is kind of a new twist to the story, do y'all have a lot of artistic freedom in how you tell this? Yeah,
absolutely. I think really from, as you saw in the pilot, once Adam Strange arrives on Krypton, and the timeline has now changed, so anything that is considered canon is now, it's now up for grabs, I guess, and so there's a lot of freedom in that. But going back to what I was just saying, we're not looking to just completely upend things just for the sake of it. That feels, like it undermines everything that's ever come before. You know what I mean? So we didn't really want to do that. But I think we're a couple of generations back from Superman's birth. It's not many people know about Krypton as a planet and what the society was like back then. So there's a lot of freedom already baked into it just from that. And then, with the time travel, it opens it up even.
Why did you pick Adam Strange to be the time traveling character?
it's a good question, because I think a lot of comic book fans will sort of be able to Mr. Gold and point to a bunch of other kind of sort of characters who could have fulfilled that role, which is very true. But I think the thing about Adam is he's a bit of a gateway character to the cosmic corner of the DC universe, if you like. So he has that relationship to Ran and to Thanagar. Which are that's those mythologies we want to bring into Krypton as well. We want to introduce. They're a part of the world of Krypton that our show's set in. Ran and Thanagar will feature in it eventually. So Adam's a great gateway character for that, but also still comes from Earth. So he's like the inverse Superman story. He's the alien on a different planet, as opposed to Superman. So he helps to be a proxy for the audience, because he's from Earth. He's the only contemporary Earthling, but he's also a gateway into another corner of the universe.
Are we going to see his costume?
Yeah. But it's in some ways it's like we're still at the at an early stage, I guess, in Adam Strange's journey. I don't know if I would say it's an origin as such, because he's been at his job for a while when we first meet him, but not that long. So there's a lot we can still explore and develop with Adam, which is exciting.
What made you guys want to pick Superman's grandfather, not his father, and tell that story instead?
I think for some of the reasons we talked about, removing that generation, it's just a less familiar character. I think we're very conscious of the audience, of not wanting the audience to feel like we're just treading water here and waiting for the planet to explode. And most people who know Krypton and know the character Jor-El will sort of associate it with that. So we just don't want people thinking like there's this sense of inevitability about the way this is all going to end. Mm-hmm. We don't know what happened to Superman's grandfather. Mm-hmm. That's just not something that people know about. So there's a freedom in that, and it helps again just create a little more distance to what has traditionally been the end of the Krypton story, but it's no longer that way. Mm-hmm. with this series.
Well, we saw in the pilot that the Zods are already a major part of the show. So are we going to see kind of how that dynamic turn, the tides turn with that?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to me to when in a lot of ways the series is just about as much about the House of Zod as it is about the House of El. Mm-hmm. There's a kind of almost almost Shakespearean kind of these two, like Romeo and Juliet kind of thing with these houses, and the relationship between Seg and Lyda. When you see them together, it's hard to imagine how did things go so wrong, that like what's going to happen here that creates that enmity between the houses, or will that happen now that the timeline has changed? But yeah, the Zods are. There's like if you sort of talk about Krypton to people, there are a few things that you could associate with them, and one of them is the House of Zod. So it was obviously a natural fit to explore that.
What made you go with Brainiac as the #1 villain this season rather than like Doomsday?
Yeah, again, well, Doomsday is actually in the first season as well. But look, I think Brainiac is another character that we haven't really seen before, not to the extent I don't think we're doing in live action anyway. And he's the perfect fit for the show. Again, being it's not an earthbound. These are not street level kind of heroes, and Brainiac is such a high concept character. It needs a kind of a big high concept show for that. I think for that character to kind of like to feel organic to it. And Brainiac really does. And of course, the other thing is that most people who know anything about Krypton from the comics will know that Brainiac comes from Kandor. It's part of canon. It has been for since forever that I know of. I can't remember when that first story was, but so yeah, it was a natural fit for that reason. And I think judging by the response so far, I think people are happy about it.
Thank you.